Parks are massive parts of cities across the country. Central Park serves millions of residents in Manhattan, New York, while the Boston Common is a gathering place for millions of its own residents every year. These major parks are usually looked upon very fondly and become a perfect destination for people to gather, spend time, eat lunch, and form a community. You can't find one person that doesn't like and support the concepts of parks in these large cities. So why aren't these parks more widespread? Why aren't cities built around these parks and have hundreds of connecting parks and green spaces throughout their urban landscape? Obviously, the idea has its easy critiques, but why don't we see cities where 50% or more are parks and public spaces? Today I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to go over the critiques and think about how this would positively impact a city, as well as the negative impact it would have and why we don't see this with new developments. Before this video starts though, make sure you do subscribe to the channel. We make content like this every week, so if you're interested in urban planning, city, and geography content, click the subscribe button below because it's really easy for you and helps me out a lot. Thank you! So to explore this issue, you need to be introduced to a design style that would relate to this, ecological design. Basically, ecological design is a very environmentally oriented tactic. It's the idea of designing a city and an urban area that matches and is built into the environment around it. It obviously involves some designs that are built for conservation, such as solar power roofs and building native plants into cities, but it's mostly just about building a city that matches the environment around it and is almost built into the nature. I'll get into any negatives later in the video, but one good example of this here in the US is the Vancouver Land Bridge in Vancouver, Washington, where a bridge is built for pedestrians over a freeway with trees and plants built into it. Pedestrian overpasses over highways are very commonly uncomfortable and gray and metal, not giving the person using them a good feeling. In this situation, you almost can't even tell you're going over State Highway 14 because of how the ecology around you continues. Imagine the feeling that this design would give you as you walk from the Columbia River waterfront over the highway. It's an extremely successful example of ecological design. So moving back to our ideas of parks within cities, it takes this design tactic and introduces it at a larger scale. Imagine if this is expanded into Vancouver, Washington. There could be an area in the downtown, including even parking garages, that are almost hidden into the urban landscape by plants and ivy. This is actually just something I wanted to mention because I saw this building and loved the design. But every sidewalk could have grass along it, and water features and large foliage that hides the street below. What if the highway that was built under the land bridge was built lower into the ground, with trees on either side to reduce noise and create a smoother transition into the roadway? Then what if this entire area above the coastline had been built into a massive park instead? Continuing on, the wetlands area northwest from the downtown could also be turned into a massive park with biking and walking trails, visitor centers, and education about the geology and environment of the region. The Burnt Bridge Creek also stretches through the city, so we can then expand a public area outwards from the river so people can walk along the water and use the amenities that it brings. Expanding out to the entire metropolitan area, let's turn around 50% of the urban environment into parks. I'm not saying they should do this right now, but I'm looking at what it could have been. This looks good, right? There are obvious benefits here. You wouldn't affect the wildlife and nature of the area nearly as much. You would create a healthier community that would encourage people to use their city's amenities and get outdoors for hikes and go eat lunch at a picnic table right outside their house. There are objectively good ideas and thoughts that go into ecological design. Almost everyone in the country can agree that cities should be built into the environment around them more properly to create a more natural feeling and become more sustainable in general. If you talk about environmentally whether a city like Washington, D.C. is better than a city like Las Vegas, most people would end up choosing the city that has the highest percent of parks and public spaces of any large city in the country. This is Washington, D.C., of course. Las Vegas is widely agreed upon as a city that was not designed well, so it brings up the question, why wasn't it designed differently? Cities continue to expand outwards with suburbs and stroads that don't look unique to the environment around them and could be anywhere in the country. And there aren't any large suburbs built into a wider connection of parks that would serve every person and give them good amenities and encourage a stronger community. Well, it then requires an explanation for why this isn't happening. And if I'm being honest, it comes down to the simple truths and nature of design and development. So let's think very simply for a second. This is a parcel of land located in Katy, Texas. It's right along the Willow Fork, a river through the area. It's also directly off Interstate 10, the most major interstate in the metropolitan area. There's a new exit that was built in the region that extends into this area and would be a great option for development. So, if you ask the developers or the city if it's a better option to turn this into a nice park with some trails along the river, or a new subdivision that would bring new residents to the city and earn tax dollars, they would obviously end up choosing the subdivision. It's an easy choice that ends up earning more revenue for the city and continues its development outwards, which is what they want. So, expanding this to a larger scale, this is one of our main problems. There just isn't an incentive for cities to do this. Thinking about investing in ecological design tactics in parks and green spaces, it's a very expensive craft that doesn't end up bringing those dollars back to the city. Yes, worrying about the environment is extremely important, and cities should work together to achieve that. But in most situations, those cities are not going to choose that if there isn't a financial incentive that will bring a better economy and situation for the city. Remember, those tax dollars can be used for other benefits, including road upgrades and making it an overall better place for the residents. Moving back to the Vancouver Land Bridge, one of the best examples of ecological design in our country. It cost $12.25 million to build. The average pedestrian overpass, or footbridge, would range from $500,000 to $4 million usually, meaning this ecological design cost the city an extra $8 million at least. Implementing ecological design tactics are not cheap, and since money ends up being the main issue, that's where I think a lot of this issue comes from. The next criticism with this idea that cities could be 50% covered by parks, or at least just focused on the large parks that they have, would be land conservation. Now, you can't tell me that you've gone your entire life without thinking what could have been developed using the land currently taken up by Central Park. Heck, that could be another 500,000 residents in that area, and it could be designed beautifully. But obviously, there's a park there. That's just an introduction to the idea of land efficiency and what a city designed this way would look like. Obviously, if a city is 50% green space, suddenly to have the same amount of population, it would expand twice as far outwards. Now, sure, it wouldn't have the same impact as expanding suburban areas have right now, but cities would be larger, there would be longer travel times, and it just isn't efficient. This could cause choke points in traffic if you don't want roads going through the parks, with thinner stretches of land to connect areas. And cities that have a limited amount of land available are going to have a top priority of expanding their city, population, and economy. Cities are not going to give parks the first crack at the land, because that's just not how the mind of development works. The city could spend millions of dollars building trails, bathrooms, playgrounds, and other things that could be used by the public. And though it would create an amazing environment, it just isn't a realistic idea, and it would require a radical change in attitudes and actions. Coming back to the main idea, using ecological design tactics is very important for the future of cities. Parks are very good, every single person agrees on that. Building cities with parks all over and buildings and areas that are built into the environment is something that most people would agree upon being a good idea. But when you look at the realism of it all, it's just so difficult to implement this. Thanks for watching. Thank you to the members this week: Brock Sanders, Stephen Priestman, SB Wilder, Florida Jake, Sir JC17, Alex Williams, Mikita Martinov, Kurt Ainsley, Jerome McCall, KMS162, JL, Bryson, Dominic Psyche, Rosebud 4, Darkbird, Big Pasty, Wolflake 73, Snyder Schwein, Benjamin Whitings, Ryan Devins, and Hazev the Wolf. Again, I obviously appreciate you all so much. You've been so helpful for me and my channel. If you want to become a member, the link is down in the description below. This is just another way to help me out as a person if you appreciate the content. You can get a monthly membership and all this money will just go straight into my bank account. So if you appreciate the content and want to help me out, this is the best way to do it. Thank you.